Abby.
Lined in one of them
And our balance went
and
up.
starting in the
And
other.
then next year we had less income than we had expense, and our balance.
Call to order. And stand for Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
Alsop.
Here.
Cruikshank.
Here.
Heifel. Here. Shields.
Here.
Musgrave.
Here.
Rankin.
Here.
Perkins.
Here. Hello. It's working. Head on to consent agenda. All items listed under consent agenda are considered to be routine and non-controversial by the Village Council and will be approved by one motion. There will be no separate discussion. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and discussed separately immediately after the consent agenda approval in its normal sequence on the regular agenda. Wow, that is a tongue tire.
I'd like to pull number 7 down to new business item number 1 and then push the remaining down.
Can you repeat that, Diff?
Number 7 consent agenda item, the consideration of council action request for a permanent traffic control order parking is the specific one.
Okay, then that's gonna be new business number,
Number 1,
One?
and then
Okay.
everything will get pushed down 1.
I would like to add new business number 3, conduct towards council. Actually, it would be new business number 4.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
And then, Mr. President, if I could just make one suggestion.
Yes, sir.
So, already posted on the agenda is consideration of entering into closed session to discuss attorney-client privilege communication. That, of course, is one of the reasons that the council can enter into closed session. This attorney-client communication is in regards to the litigation that occurred regarding the water and sewer funds. As we know now, it's public, that case was dismissed. The attorney has some information for council regarding that case. I would suggest, if you'd be willing to move that up on the agenda to just after the audit report. That way Ms. Hill could complete her audit report, but then council could go into closed session with the attorneys. It'll be a brief discussion, I believe, and then when council came out, they would be available then to answer any questions that the audience may have regarding that litigation, or council would be free to make any statements they wish regarding that litigation.
All right. Item, that'll be new business item number 3.
No, it'd be
No.
number 2.
2.
So number 1 would be the audit report, number 2 would be closed session, number 3 would be
No.
the drop-down consent agenda.
You dropped down number 7 to 1.
Okay.
But,
No.
however, I do think Mr. Cruikshank's last listing would be the most appropriate to have the traffic control order be number 3.
Okay.
And that is a staff item.
Yeah.
And that would allow then for Plant Moran and the attorney to proceed and then vacate.
So then
Okay.
number 7 is now number 3
Under new business.
under new business.
Okay.
Yep.
Do we have a motion?
Clear as mud?
I'll make that motion.
Yeah. We'll figure it out when we get there.
I'll make that motion that we juggle everything and
Accept the consent agenda?
accept the consent agenda, yes.
I'll second.
Roll call?
Heifel.
Yes.
Shields.
Yes.
Musgrave.
Yes.
Rankin.
Yes.
Alsop.
Yes.
Cruikshank.
Yes.
Perkins.
Yes. At this time, Mr. Cruikshank and I have a presentation. Why don't you go first, Mr. Cruikshank?
Sure. This presentation is basically just giving a certificate and a handshake and a personal thank you to those that volunteered their time on various committees and then other things in the village that warrant this type of action. I think we've lacked as a village in the past few years of recognizes those people that do give of their time, that aren't elected, that aren't paid, that aren't, that simply do it just for their love of the village. And so I wanted to make sure that we at least recognize them. So I'm going to pass out these for the 2 committees that I ran over the past 18 months, which is the Blight Task Force and the Waterworks Committee. And then President Perkins has some other.
I have fireworks and holiday.
Fireworks and holidays. So let's get started with that. If anybody's here on the Blight Task Force, please come on up. Anybody? I know there's a few that were not going to be here.
Why don't you just read up
Yeah.
their names?
So, okay, yeah, so let's do that officially too. Sorry. So for the Blight Task Force, the first one is Amy Folks. I don't think she's here right now. Okay. Lenore Johnston, she did email and sent her regrets that she's unable to attend tonight, but we'll get that to her as well. Richard Kinnaman. Oh, I saw Richard. Did I miss him? No? Okay. And then Dick Roselle was the other one. And then lastly, Joe Pilarchio, he did respond and say he was unable to make it too. So, okay. Blight Task Force, nobody. All right. Waterworks. I know there's a few people here, so let's start off with that one. AC Allray, please. Thank you, sir. Appreciate your service. Here for you, man. Thank you. Thank you. Sherilyn Everly. Thank you very much.
Got two.
Oh, I did? Monica McAllister. She was here. Okay. Chris Fleckenstein. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Brad Rebar. Thank you, Brad. I appreciate it. Thank you. Pete Clemens. I don't think I saw him. George Cullis. I know he's here. Come on up, George. Thank you, sir. And now I'll turn it over to Mr. Perkins.
Alrighty, for fireworks, we have Dylan Clausen. Put that one aside. Holiday, we have a slew. Nick Clem. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
Terry Connell. You should put everything, don't you?
Thank you.
Shauna Campbell. There you are. Thank you. Angie Lemon. Juliana Chef. Do we have any chefs? I have three of you.
No.
No. Sarah McCanny. Dave King. Can't get her. Nope.
Not here tonight. All
That
right.
concludes mine. Thank you. This time, we'll open the floor up for public comment. Members of the public can address council once recognized by the chair. Comments that are limited to a maximum of 4 minutes. Council may extend this time by an additional 4 minutes by a majority vote. Prior to addressing council, members of the public shall state their name and address for the record. Do we have any public comment? Really? This might be a first. Tony, you have nothing? Wow. Well,
Don't
we'll
be shocked.
move on past public comment to old business, of which we have none. And on to new business. What was our number one?
Consideration.
The audit.
Yeah,
The audit.
the audit.
Consideration of the acceptance of the Village of Holly audit report for fiscal year 2016 by Plant Moran.
Hello, thank
you
you.
doing?
My name is Pam Hill. I am the audit partner with Plant Moran, who was in charge of the village's audit once again this year. And so we do have the results of your June 30th, 2017 audit. You will have a couple deliverables in front of you today. You have the financial statements, which are the really thick 60-plus page document. I had not planned on going through the whole thing in detail tonight. However, you know I love this, so I would be more than happy to go through any numbers or any questions that you do have on anything. You should also have a letter addressed to the village council. So we will go through that. And then instead of going through the financial statements in page-by-page detail, we put together a graph presentation, kind of like we've done in the past, just to talk about some of the trends at the village over the last few years. So while I was not going to go through the entire financial statements, I did want to touch on pages 1 and 2. That is the audit opinion letter. So that's what the village hires Plant Moran to provide. It was, once again, an unmodified opinion, so the highest level of assurance that the village can receive from their auditors. Basically, what that means is the numbers, as they are presented within the financial statements, are free of material misstatement. So it doesn't talk about the fiscal health of the village at all. That's what we'll kind of get into a little bit when we look at the graphs today. So best report and opinion that you can get from your audit firm. We spend probably about 300 hours auditing the books and records of the village. And so this year was Debbie's first year getting ready for us. And so I did really just want to give her a big thank you. She was great to work with, great questions, really tried her best to do, everything right. And, the thing that I think really works out the best is she calls us during the year when she has questions. So when we come out in September to do the audit, there's not a whole bunch of surprises. We know what's going on at the village during the year, and having that open relationship really helps in order for the audit to be efficient at the end of the year. So I do want to thank Debbie and her team for all the hard work that they did in preparation for the audit.
Absolutely.
So with that, I will briefly go through the graphs, and I don't know if anyone really wants one in the audience, but there are a couple extras in case anyone's interested. First readers, I'll take the highest bid. There's a few up here.
I'm an award winner.
So the financial statements for actually any governmental entity in the entire state of Michigan are available on the Department of Treasury's website. So, if there are individuals who think, I'd really want to look at these financial statements, like someone like me would, they are available to anyone for actually like the last 10 years plus. So you could go out and look at any community's information if you'd like. It is all public information. So starting on page 1, this graph takes a look at the general fund. So we're purely focused on the general fund, this village's main budgeting fund. On the left, you'll see 2017, the middle 2016, and then the far right is 2015's number. So I wanted to focus mainly on 2017 and then some of the changes between last year and this year. The column on the left is total revenues. That was a little under 2.9 million this year, really very consistent with last year. Total expenditures were 2,767,000, which were up about 160,000 over prior year. And so the net of the revenues and expenses was approximately $100,000. So the village added approximately $100,000 to fund balance in the current year. So I want to talk a little bit about some of those differences in what made up that contribution or the increase to fund balance in the current year. So the revenues, although I said they were fairly consistent, your state shared revenue, which is the money that the village receives from the state through sales tax collections, was up this year, along with the money that you receive from the local community stabilization authority, which is the new authority that kind of replaced the personal property tax, if you remember that, or replaced a portion of that. That payment actually came in a lot higher than they anticipated. We do not anticipate that will be the same going forward, so some of that's a little bit of a one-time bump. I think this year the payment was around $30,000, but going forward they're not estimating that'll be quite that high. So some of that's one-time in nature. And then to offset some of those increases, you did see a decrease actually this year in building permit revenue. Wasn't a significant decrease, but it was down, I think, around $10,000 over prior year. And then on the expense side, so expenses were up. Nothing really, when I was looking through it, really stuck out as a really big increase. There was a lot of small increases, slight wage increases, slight benefit increases. I think the contract with Oakland County for dispatch was up slightly. So it's a lot of very minimal increases that kind of added up to that 100,000 plus increase in total. So with that, the general fund again had a good year, up about 100,000. Total fund balance, which is the number on the bottom, was about 1.6 million. And of that, approximately 870,000 is unassigned. So that's the amount that's available to be spent per se, or not earmarked for something else. So typically when we look at the fiscal health of the general fund, we like to look at the unassigned fund balance as a percentage of expenditures. And that number this year was approximately 31% of general fund expenditures, which is a good, healthy balance. It's not, hey, the village has all this money that you're sitting on, but it's also not like, watch out, the state's going to be at your door tomorrow kind of thing. So a minimum level for a community your size is probably 20 to 25%, and you're right around 30. So you're right around that minimum level of fund balance. Any questions on the general fund? No? Okay. We have this graph in here, and you'll probably remember this. We've had it for the last several years, just related to taxable value, to just continue to remind everyone that because of Proposal A and Headley and the way that they work, property tax revenues to the village will be limited to the lesser of 5% or inflation, going forward until Proposal A or Headley are ever eliminated. And so what that means is that your taxable value, if we project out, I think it was like 2.5% of inflation, it will take the village out to at least 2035 to get back your taxable value back to where it was in '08, kind of before the market fell. And so it's important to remember, because I know as members of the village council, you're out talking to residents all the time. Some of them may see their home values go up, maybe 5% or 6%. That does not mean 5 or 6% revenue increase to the village, because it's being capped at that inflationary rate. So just important reminder as you're going into budgeting season, and then also as you're having conversations with residents. So that will continue to be a huge budget challenge going forward. The next slide is all the other governmental funds. So your major and local streets, all of that, everything basically but general fund and water and sewer. And so 17, your revenues, again, were fairly consistent to where they've been the last several years. Expenses were up, and your fund balance was really still pretty consistent to last year. Nothing alarming there on either side. So I did want to talk a little bit about the sewer fund. And so if you see, again, on the left would be 2017. So your operating revenues are up slightly. Your operating expenses are very, very close to where they were last year. So your operating income is still in a negative amount. So although it's less of a negative than last year, it's still a negative. And so we do want to be careful, obviously, when going through and setting rates, that we're ensuring that the rates are capturing the actual costs of running the system. If you go too many years running in a deficit, then that'll be a big problem, a big problem for the sewer fund. And as you know, with water and sewer, those funds are so heavy dependent on capital. So if you have a water main break or a sewer that needs repair, it's not a $10,000 issue. It's usually a $50,000 issue or a $100,000 issue. So you have to be a little bit more careful when looking at that. And the next page would be the water fund. So similar situation in the water fund. Revenue is actually down slightly. The expenses in both the water and sewer fund are up over last year. Not all related to legal fees, but as I think you're going to be discussing as you go into closed session, you know the cost of the lawsuit and what it's been to the village. So those would be, the majority of that would be reflected in this fiscal year. So your operating income in the water fund, actually you had a loss again. It was about $148,000 loss, a little bit higher of a loss than you had last year. So again, just continuing to monitor those rates, ensuring that those rates are covering the costs of running those systems. So that was all I had on the number side of it. I don't know if there's any particular questions before I go through the letter. No? Okay. Then I will just briefly go through the letter. So there's a few different sections included in the letter. On page 3 and 4, so this is the required communication under the auditing standards related to internal controls. So during the audit, there were a few entries that were posted as a part of the audit. I have to say the books and records were in very good shape when we got here. There was, I think we say in here that we saw marked improvement over prior years. So we know that your team worked hard to get them in shape. But we did find some adjustments as part of the audit, which is typical for a lot of clients. I know Debbie's working to get it down to none, so we will continue to work with her in the upcoming years to get it to that. And really, with the small staff that you have, the only way to kind of get rid of some of those is to have that second review, and oftentimes that's hard to do with a small department. And I know you had some vacant positions and things like that during the year as well. Which brings us to the next item related to internal controls on page 4, related to segregation of duties. So again, because we know that there was some positions that weren't filled during the year, and there was a lack of segregation of duties related to just the bank reconciliation process. And again, just because you have a small office, that is an important control. And so we are happy to report that we did sit down and discuss this with management in September, and since then they have added a second review, and the village manager is performing a review of the bank reconciliations, and we kind of talked through what kind of items they should be looking for and that kind of thing. So hopefully next year that item should be gone. And then we also said, we just talked a little bit about a best practice related to the cash function at the village. And I know, again, I spoke with the village manager and the village clerk about this as well. Positive pay, so I'm not sure how familiar you are with positive pay, but basically what it is something that you can have the bank set up, and when the village goes to do a check run, a list of all the checks that the village has approved goes to the bank, and the bank will not cash a check that hasn't been on one of those lists. And so it helps to protect you against fraud. As a governmental entity, everything you do and have is public information. It's all FOIAble, it's all available, down to the copies of checks, right? So people know what your checks look like. They even know who your vendors are because you approve them and you approve the disbursement list. So fraud in this realm is even more so than you might see like in somebody else is coming to our party here. There's a big bug up there. But anyway, he really likes audits too. So, so anyway, just something to be aware of. I believe that management is looking into this. I think the fee is very nominal, and I want to say it's less than $100 a month. So it's something that's definitely worth looking into to help safeguard the village's assets. So then on pages 5, 6, and I think it goes through 7. Oh, no, 5 and 6. So if you recall, before the audit starts, we send a communication out to the village council. We talk to the village president. We talk a little bit about what our audit plan is. And pages 5 and 6 is a follow-up to that discussion to say, did we have any deviations from our plan as we set forth to you back before the audit started? And basically what all that says is we didn't deviate from our plan. It's a lot of words to say that. And then lastly, a whole bunch of legislative items on the last few pages. This was printed before the latest legislative item that was passed last Friday, I believe, related to legacy costs for pension and retiree health care. So I'm sure you've seen emails come through from the MML. It's a big hot topic lately, related among all of our governmental entities. Just talking a little bit about funding for those legacy costs and what the state oversight and legislation is going to be surrounding those. So more to come on that, but that is definitely a hot topic and one that I know the village is addressing. So with that, that was all I had planned on covering today, but again, more than happy to answer any questions or talk through anything else that anyone might have.
So our overall health is looking pretty good.
Yep.
It's good news.
Yes.
That's what we like to hear.
Anybody have any questions? No? Well, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
So our item number 2 is going to be closed session.
Make the motion that we move into closed session.
Thank you. Can I ask you to include Director Clausen along with myself and Ms. Bigger in that closed session?
Oh, absolutely.
Two attorneys.
Do we have a second on that motion?
No support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We'll enter into closed session. It's 7:27.
Suzanne, I'm Carolyn. It's a pleasure.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Anytime.
Do we have a motion to enter back into regular session?
I'll make the motion that we that we enter back into regular session.
Support.
All in favor?
We need a
Aye.
roll,
Aye.
we need a roll call on the
Yeah, we've got it.
Okay.
Yeah. we
Roll
need to-
call?
closed session with roll call.
Cruikshank.
Yes.
Heupel. Yes. Shield.
Yes.
Musgrave.
Yes.
Rankin.
Yes.
Alsop.
Yes.
Perkins.
Yes.
And before you move on to the next item,
I was about to correct that.
then I'll leave it to you.
I would like to make a motion on new business item number 1, that we accept the audit from Plant Moran.
Support.
Do we need a roll call for that?
You do not.
All in favor?
Aye.
Move
Any
on to
opposed?
new business item number 3.
Was that we also need a motion
Roll call to enter.
to go into closed session, and we need to take a roll call vote.
Okay, so I made that motion and Suzanne supported.
And
She
Suzanne
did.
supported.
So we needed a roll call vote to go back into closed session. It was a unanimous vote by voice, but we need to hear from each of you.
Okay.
Cruikshank.
Yes.
Heupel. Yes. Shield.
Yes.
Musgrave.
Yes.
Rankin.
Yes.
Alsop.
Yes.
Perkins.
Yes.
Motion pass.
Motion carries. Thank you. So, Mr. Cruikshank, you brought item number 7 down.
Yeah, that was just for the council action request, the permanent traffic control order. The only reason I brought it down is I just think we should have a discussion and a roll call vote on that. Specific, if we're taking something and making it no parking now, instead of just a consent agenda, I just wanted to have it presented. So if, well, Chief Story's not here tonight, but
Sergeant
Sergeant
Simpson is.
I'm not sure if you're aware of what the request is, or maybe Jerry could speak in your stead. I don't want to put you on the spot, sorry.
Yeah, no, so actually Sergeant Simpson.
Closed session was 2, that should be 3.
Yeah, we split it. He brought it down and made it 2.
Closed session was 2.
Oh, 3, excuse me. Item number 3.
One motion. Guys, talk about this closed meeting.
When we get to public comment.
Okay, so, Chief Story's requesting, he's not able to be with us tonight, but his request was, regarding Church Street at Broad. And so that's right across from the police station. And if you'll think about that area a little bit, there's a, apartment complex right on the very corner. And so many times there are cars that are parked, on the north side of the street, the intersection, which causes a couple of different problems. One, it causes problems for vehicles as they're turning onto Church Street from Broad, because it's such a short span from the Broad Street, from the road frontage to the driveway for the apartment complex. And so when cars there, if there's another car that's exiting, it creates a hazardous situation in that vein. It also creates somewhat of a vision obstruction for vehicles. And so we rely on the police department, and particularly our police chief, who acts as our traffic engineer, to kind of monitor situations and make recommendations, first through my office and then to the council, for changes or modifications to situations. So his request is that there be no parking signs installed on the north side of Church Street from the corner of Broad Street to the entrance of the apartment ingress and egress. This will alleviate the hazardous condition that exists and still allow for some street parking on the side of Church Street. So that's the chief's request. And if you have any specific questions about the situation, Sergeant Simpson has a lot of years on the department there for such a young guy. And so I'm sure he can get the answers for you.
So essentially, we're just removing the ability to park in front of that, or right next to that apartment building.
That's right,
Yeah.
what's up to the intersection.
Because the driveway is directly behind it
Correct.
that enters the street, so it's about 100, looks like 100 feet of road.
If that,
Yeah.
yes.
So, I mean, it's a pretty small section.
Yeah, no,
That
I
is-
just, in the answer to transparency, I just wanted to make sure that we discuss it and do a vote. I didn't think it was a consent agenda worthy item, that's all. So I would make the motion that we take Chief's recommendation and make the parking, or amend it to have no parking there at Church Street and Broad.
I'll second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Consideration of, actually, this would be item number 4. Consideration of the vendor selection for sewer cleaning and televising for the SAW grant.
Thank you. As part of the SAW grant, we put in several things, and one of them is televising and cleaning the sewer lines and doing an assessment of that. So through Rowe Engineering or Rowe Professional Services, they solicited bids for that. We received 3 bids back. They have noticed that because a lot of communities received the SAW grant, their costs have slowly increased. We received 3 bids back. Our recommendation is not the lowest bidder, but based on several things. Young's Environmental is local. The lowest bidder is about a 2.5-hour ride to the west of us. So for them to mobilize and be here, and then they've also had some experience with them, and the type of software they're using to record it, and the timeliness of the reports was off a little bit. So that's why they would recommend that we use Young's. And they're also, if you look at the breakdown for their extras, they were the cheapest if we run into any kind of issues to do those. So in the long run, the costs could, they would not be the lowest bidder. The lowest bidder, those costs were the highest actually for the extras. So the recommendation is to use Young's Environmental for this work. And that would
Thank you,
take
Mr.
place over the next 4 or 5 months.
Cool. Thanks, Mr. Clausen.
Thank you.
Brian, I have
Oh,
one
you have a question?
question. I see that the mineral deposit removal and the protruding tap cutting is a lot less expensive than any of the others. Is that something that occurs a lot, or?
Not normally. I mean, we do see mineral deposits when there's clay pipe, and then the extruding is when someone taps into their main. If it's done by a contractor and just shoves it in there, and they can't get the camera through, they have to run a separate cutter through to take that out. But normally, we don't see that too often. Usually, we'll see a problem there if there's a protruding lead in there, because debris will build up around it and it causes a backup, so.
Would that be the reason why the others were maybe more costly, because it doesn't occur as often?
No, they try to low bid the main part of it, and then they try to make it up on the extra, so they'll say there's extra cleaning involved in the calcium deposits and that kind of stuff, and that's what Rose said they have seen, that they'll claim that, hey, we gotta do a heavy-duty cleaning versus a normal cleaning, so we have to charge you extra, and then it starts to add up.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
If there's no discussion, I will make the motion that we approve Young's as the recommended sewer cleaning and televisor for the SAW grant.
Support.
Roll call?
Musgrave,
Yes.
Rankin,
Yes.
Yes.
Alsop, Cruikshank,
Yes.
Hypo,
Yes.
Shield,
Yes.
Perkins.
Yes. Item number 4. Motion carries. Item number 4, Ms. Musgrave?
Conduct towards council.
Isn't there one more?
Well, you had, excuse me, item number
There was
5.
one more.
You had added one.
5, I did, yes, but I thought there was another one
Nope.
before that. Okay.
No,
All right,
last issue.
What I would like to bring up is the conduct towards council at our meetings here. We sit through these meetings every 2 weeks or twice a month, and it's getting to the point where we are basically being screamed at by a lot of people and cursed at, flipped off with the bird with fingers of people. We're here, we're elected officials, we're here to listen to what your concerns are. We, however, do not deserve to be screamed at and cursed at and called every name in the book. And I personally, I'm very offended by a lot of things that occur here, and I would like to see it stopped or have some means to where if it's gonna start to get out of hand like that, like it has been in the past, if it's not handled by the gavel, then somebody be removed. We don't deserve it. Every single one of us are all community residents. We're here to try to do the best thing that we can do and make the best decisions. It's not an easy job a lot of the time, but for whatever reason, people's hostility and anger get the best of them, and they take it out on us, which none of us are meek, and we can handle things, but we certainly don't deserve it.
I like abuse.
Give it to Bob. Thank you, Ms. Musgrave.
I've got it before and I like it.
Well, I don't like being flipped off because somebody doesn't like what I had to say when I wasn't even speaking to them. I think that's rude.
Was that in here?
Yes, it was in here,
Huh.
and it was witnessed by 2 other people.
I'm not laughing, I'm just saying I've got abused. You know,
Well,
I just-
I think it's rude. And anybody else. I've seen Dave be screamed at and called every name in the book, and
Me too.
it's just, and Jim,
Maybe you should point them out.
Well, in
No.
the future,
I'm not gonna do that.
I
They
will-
know who they are.
I will exercise the gavel more in the
I
future.
would appreciate that.
Yes, indeed.
Because it's, I mean, the next step is
Tell them to behave.
removing people either from committees that they sit on or removing them from here, if it continues.
Okay. Thank you for that. Now move on to reports. Mr. Manager?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. President. And just real briefly, so, for the audience's benefit, so we went into a closed session to discuss attorney-client privilege communication regarding the water litigation or the litigation against the Village of Holly for claims that the village improperly used funds that was collected for the capital use charges, that is, or that base rate that is collected from each water customer. We're happy to announce, and we have already done this a little bit, that that case was completely dismissed. So it was dismissed last Wednesday on December the 6th, and not only was it dismissed based on the lack of merit of the case. There's absolutely no basis for that litigation. It was ridiculous that the village had to go through that. Through the course of the case, it was first filed in the late spring. And so over that time, since that case was filed, the council and staff has taken a lot of criticism and a lot of abuse from people that would appear in this council chamber and out in the public, and it's ridiculous. There's absolutely no reason for it. In fact, the real unfortunate thing is that the persons responsible for filing that lawsuit, and whether they were a named defendant or there was somebody in behind that was encouraging it, they did nothing more than sue their neighbors, sue their fellow water customers. The Village of Holly does not make money off water and sewer funds. That is a fund that is only created and governed by law to pay for expenses of delivering that service. And so for individuals to file suit on that and waste, by the time we're done with this, in excess of $200,000 to do nothing more than prove that the village was doing nothing improper, it's just plain wrong. There's really not a lot else to say about it. We will be doing some public education. We're not done talking about this case. We're going to do some public education on what those fees are used for, and really some more nuts and bolts of this case and the improprieties with it. But we're very happy that it's completed. It's unfortunate, like I said, that we had to spend over $200,000 to prove that we were not doing anything improper, but that is the legal system in the way that it exists right now. Hopefully someday there'll be some changes in that, and that unfair burden won't be placed on municipalities. Next, we had talked previously about road repairs and future needs of infrastructure repairs, rebuilding within the village. Staff has met with Robert Benzinski from Benzinski and Company. That is one of the companies that does consulting for municipalities as far as financing options or how to pay for these infrastructure. As you remember, when Road Services was in, they did PACER ratings or assessments of all our streets, and they had a number of $15 million, right, if we were to go in and repair every street right now. Now, we know that that's not feasible, but we do know that if we don't do anything, that number is not going to go down. It's going to continue to increase. And so we think it's important to address that, because you not only have just the road repair issues while you're repairing the roads, you really need to take a good look at the water and sewer lines that are underneath those roads. And those repairs will be every bit as much or more than the road repairs. So as we met with Mr. Benzinski, we talked about different options, but we think that it's important that not only staff and council has the opportunity to listen to Mr. Benzinski, but that the public does as well. And we look at that really, again, as a way of just educating everybody that lives in the community, because every resident, every business owner, they are stakeholders in this whole situation. So along with staff, we want to make sure we have a real good understanding. So we have scheduled Mr. Benzinski to be our lead presentation during our January budget workshop. So on January the 9th, our first council meeting in January, we'll have Mr. Benzinski here to talk about funding options and different scenarios that the village could look at. We'll also have Roe come back and talk about, again, the worst streets and some different scenarios that we could think of for repair. And really, council certainly does not have to make a decision in January, but I think sometime in the preceding months, we'll have to make a decision as a community of whether we want to place an issue on the ballot to consider road millage. I mean, if you don't have good roads, you're not getting anywhere. You not only impair our residents from getting from point A to point B, you also impact public safety, being able to get to point A and point B in a timely fashion. And as the chiefs will tell you, it's not minutes that matter in response time, it's seconds. And so we have Mr. Benzinski is going to be with us. I'd also like council to think about, for that January 9th study session, to think yourself where you would like to see funds collected by the village directed in this upcoming budget. And so we call this kind of council visioning, but think about some areas that are important, that you feel are important for the village to work on. Your department heads are already working on their budgets, not only for next year, but for the next 2 years, just so that we get ahead of the curve a little bit. So we really work on those pretty much 12 months out of the year, but we concentrate on them during this time. So think about it, even though we're working on them, we still can tailor our budgets and mold them to how council feels that the money should be spent. And so really, I think staff, we realize, I know the council realizes that you are elected, we're appointed for one purpose, to serve the people, and so we want to direct those funds towards those purposes. We also had talked about a joint visioning session or workshop with the Carl Richter Community Center Advisory Board. I met with that advisory board today, and they have clear on their calendars, and I had talked about this date previously with council, of January the 16th. That is a off council night, it's a Tuesday, and so if council would be in agreement, we will schedule that joint visioning session for 7 p.m. And again, the purpose of that visioning session will not really be, although we could talk about it, the day-to-day operations, but more what we as a community want the community center to accomplish. Why do they exist? Why did they get authorization to be formed to begin with? And so they've been in operation for a couple of years and have done a good job. I think they accomplished their mission that they initially were tasked for, but they've evolved to a point to where they could do more. But we want to involve the advisory board, the council, as well as the Holly area schools, because they need to be a part of this process also of determining what type of service or programs that are delivered to the community center. So I will go ahead and schedule that for 7 o'clock. We'll meet in the cafeteria so that we can square up around tables, and of course, any of the public that is available to attend, that would be great. And we'll publicize that and get that date out also. And then we will continue on for the next couple of months on our study session meetings, which are the first meetings of the council each month. Then we'll start our budget workshops. So we'll start out with public safety and then move through the rest of the budgets in that fashion. So that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Mr. Attorney?
Been a rather quiet month or a couple of weeks since I last saw you, so I really don't have anything to offer in that regard. I did want to speak very briefly about the water lawsuit. I was not directly involved, as all of you know, but I read the opinion, and there's just some things that I think are worthy of highlight. As Jerry mentioned, this was a decision on the merits, which means that, we all hear about technical violations or technical wins, deadline is missed, or you win a case based upon a very precise definition or a wordplay. That's a technical win. This is a decision on the merits, which means that the court looked beyond the technicalities and looked directly at the allegations and came out with a decision which said this was alleged, this did not happen as a matter of fact. You don't see that very often. When a party like the village files a motion for summary disposition, all the plaintiff has to do to overcome that, to defeat that, is to show a genuine issue of material fact. All they have to show is that, you know, it's possible someone could read it this way, or it's possible that this or that could happen. Very low burden for a party to overcome. And so for a judge to say, you know what, I'm going to go to the merits and dismiss this at this point in time is unusual. It happens, but it's unusual. And I think it's a testament to the fact that this case factually was misguided from the start. And to get a judge to find that, I think, is quite remarkable. The last thing on that is you're also allowed to go into closed session and talk about specific pending litigation. And although this case was dismissed by order of the court last Wednesday, you're still within the appeals period where a plaintiff could appeal, where motions for sanctions could be brought or cost could be sought. And so the case is still pending in that sense. And so you were allowed to go into closed session for that purpose as well. So congratulations to counsel, to the administration, most importantly, lawyer to lawyer, the lawyers who defended that case.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Bigger?
Nothing really to add to my written report. December's been really busy with a lot of deadlines, but so far we've met them all. And I was really glad that Pam and Caroline were both here tonight to present to you.
Big thumbs up on this.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Department heads, do you have anything?
It's nice to hear that we were vindicated on the lawsuit.
Absolutely. All righty. Planning Commission?
Planning Commission met last week, and we gave the the site plan approval for Dawson's Tire. They were given a preliminary in September. I think it was September. Yeah, October, November. Yeah, so in September we gave them preliminary to start doing some things, but there were some other plans we needed worked out and some specifics on the building heights and if you, basically just dotting the i's and crossing the t's. They came back. Everything was excellent, and they were given the full approval to continue working. And driving by it every day, that building looks awesome.
So much better.
Just fantastic. So kudos to them, and I hope they do well there.
Thank you. KRCC?
We just had a meeting today at 5:30, and as Jerry explained, we have decided to have a joint study session on January 16th, 7 o'clock. At that time, we will discuss the purpose of the community center, what we're doing now and what we want to do to change. We believe that we are under publicizing the events and the activities and the progress that we're making. We would like to, we foresee breaking down the future study sessions into first the purpose, second the roles, and then third the procedures of the community center. That's what
Right.
we're seeing looking forward.
Thank you. Historical?
No meetings, and same with Haya. I have nothing for the other one.
Parks?
Parks is on hiatus until January 3rd, I believe it is, 2nd or 3rd. First Wednesday of the year, we'll have our first meeting, so
All right.
I'll have more to report then.
ZBA? Nothing? Mr. Cruikshank, council comments?
Anything on DDA for you?
Oh, DDA? What the hell did we do last night? We didn't do a whole lot. I forget about me sometimes.
And me.
No, we didn't have much new business. There's really nothing on the agenda.
Okay.
Nothing for personnel and finance either.
Yeah, that's why I didn't ask.
Yeah.
Council comments?
Yes.
All right. A couple things. First one is last month I had mentioned that I think we should be discussing and talking about the moratorium on medical marijuana in the 1 year. The only reason I'm bringing this up is I think it should be a ballot issue, and I realize that it will not cost the village anything to let the people decide.
But we
We
put a
came to-
moratorium on it that we can't discuss
Correct.
at all.
So I'm going to be making the motion that we rescind the 1 year moratorium on making any decisions, and then having council approve putting it on a ballot in the August primary. And so that would be something that we would have to vote on. So before, I guess we could do the discussion on if there's anybody that would like to second that motion on removing the one-year moratorium and then putting it on a ballot for the residents to vote on whether we should be opting into the medical marijuana law.
I will support that.
Dave, can I ask you a question, sir?
Sure.
Why are you so pushy on this drug thing in town?
Well, there's multiple things. Number one is economic benefit to the village. I think that we do see to reap some benefits from that. Number two is there are patients that have to drive many miles to get their medicine. Number three, I've said this multiple times, that I think the drug war is a major player in the industry and that it actually hurts people more than it helps. So anytime I can reverse any of that type of stuff, I'm all on board. So this specific, though, is putting it on a ballot should not scare any of you. Because if you think it would pass, then, and you are against it, then you're going against exactly what you were elected for, to represent the people. If you think it will fail, then you should have no problems with putting it on a ballot because you think it's gonna fail. But we, as a council, putting the one-year moratorium, has said we are failing to make a decision on this. We are failing to do the research.
No, we invoked a study group that would,
That has not
for a
taken
year.
place.
It's already begun. Mr. Mishler,
But again, we're putting it in citizens' hands instead of us doing the research and coming up with an answer ourselves.
We don't have to do anything right now. We had a year on it. So
That's
we
right.
should wait till the new council comes in to make
Well-
a decision in November.
So we have a motion and a second on the floor to rescind the one-year moratorium and put it on a ballot for the residents to decide and not us. So if the residents vote it down, we do nothing. If the residents pass it, what this will do will force us to put into gear, to get into planning, to make sure that we are doing this the safe way and the correct way. And this is preemptive to something because in 2018, in November, we will be voting as a state to legalize recreational marijuana. And I want to make sure that we put everything in place now to make sure that everything is above board and we are protecting our children, we are putting it in the right locations in the village, and we are doing the right thing. So
Mr.
that
Gilder,
is what it is.
we placed a one-year moratorium. I do not believe we can even take a vote to remove that at this time, can we?
I think that you can. There can be a motion to
Okay.
rescind.
I wanted to make sure.
Which is the nature of the motion. But while I have the floor, what you're talking about is an advisory ballot question. Because the electorate, the decision is ultimately council's as to whether or not you opt in. A ballot question in this case couldn't tie the council's hands. It wouldn't replace a vote by you, but it would be used presumably by each of you as a barometer for what the people want. So as long as it's clear that this is advisory, that if the voters authorize moving forward with it, it still has to come back to a vote. You're not giving up your vote on this issue if that happens. That's important, I think, to point out.
Thank you.
So in other words,
said my
Mr. Gildner, we would still have to vote to even put it back on the ballot, or put it on the ballot at some point.
No, what I mean by
Whether or
that
not we
is-
would accept it.
Right.
The vote on the ballot would not be a directive. It
So
would
if
just
it went
be.
in August, the next council meeting after August, we would probably have it on our agenda to physically vote, and you would be voting based off of the ballot, whether you wanted to or not. I guess you could go against the wishes of the ballot outcome to vote against it or for it, depending on what the outcome is. But that would be, like you said, the barometer, that if it overwhelmingly gets approved in there, then us as representatives of the people should be voting the way that we have obviously said.
Well, we have a motion, you second. Do we have any other comments? Do a roll call.
Cruikshank,
Yes.
Heupel,
No.
Shield,
No.
Musgrave,
No.
Rankin,
Yes.
Alsop,
No.
Perkins.
No.
Okay. Next up for the my 2 cents on the lawsuit is that the biggest thing that bothers me is I'm saddened that it was a former township supervisor that was the attorney on the case. No one in the lawsuit came to either me or any other council member that I'm aware of to ask us about the water rates and what our opinions on them are, or office administration to find the files to try and find something with what they are accusing of. And it cost us $200,000 to figure that out. It's huge. I mean, in a village that doesn't have much money to begin with, now we have to shell out $200,000 to prove that we're doing the right thing. Us as elected officials should be looking at those financial statements and calling out any irregularities. I know that's what I do, and I have questions. If there's something that I see that doesn't make sense, the first thing is, hey Jerry, hey Debbie, can you explain this to me so that I understand it so it makes sense? Or is there an error in here? And I would assume that us as council members should be doing the same thing. And I'm ecstatic that that the lawsuit was dismissed without merit. And but I'm sad that it cost us $200,000 to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Cruikshank. Ms. Heupel?
About the lawsuit, my frustration is not with the resident who filed the claim that we won. I feel her legal counsel should be admonished. He's a former Holly Township supervisor, and the fact that he agreed to accept this case against the village in the first place is beyond belief. He knows how the water charges work. I know there's no recourse to recoup our legal fees at this time, but I wish we could bill a $200,000 legal fee directly to Mr. Dale Smith.
Thank you, Ms. Heupel. Ms. Musgrave?
I am very happy that we won this case. I mean, and as my colleagues have said, $200,000. Do you realize how much money that could have put into this community? And it's just ridiculous. And I would hope that anybody in the future that even considers taking legal action against something would consider the outcome and exactly what they're doing before they actually file something.
Thank you. Mr. Shield?
I'll echo my fellow council members with the happiness that we won the lawsuit. And on another note, with the Dickens Festival the last 3 weeks, we just wanted to thank all the department heads and staff for all the hard work and dedication, and also volunteers that dedicated their time to make our community what it is.
All right, thank you. Mr. Rankin?
Well, I guess echoing everybody else's sentiments, I'm glad that we were able to get the case, the water fee case dismissed. But I'm also disappointed that we as a council weren't able to agree to put on the ballot the question about the marijuana. The fact that it's not even putting the question of bringing marijuana direct, it wouldn't cause the marijuana industry to come to Holly. It wouldn't be a question on the ballot allowing that. It would just be a question finding out if that's what the people even wanted. And I know, me personally, I can't quite get a feel for which side wants it, or which side is stronger as far as who does or doesn't want it. It seems pretty evenly split to me from all of my sources. So I would welcome something on the ballot where people that feel strongly one way or the other could go and make their feelings known, so that we would have some kind of an idea. Because at this point, everybody that I've talked to and everybody that through social media and online and all that, it has been so back and forth and 50-50 that I would welcome some sort of definitive word as to whether or not that industry would be welcome in Holly. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Rankin. Mr. Alsop? In this summer, we will be discussing this marijuana issue again. This is going
But I think at this point, we could have gotten out ahead of it.
I understand.
And I think it's better for us to be prepared and looking into the issue instead of just ignoring
My
it.
thought was that we agreed to give it a year. Mr. Mishler has put together a group of citizens to study, speak with other citizens, and then report back to us. Then we can move forward with any action.
I feel that, I
To
still
jumpstart
feel that
that.
we're pushing the job that we should be doing off onto our citizens. I think that
And
that's.
I
But I
think we
think
should be
that
doing it with
part's
the ballot
done.
initiative. But
Right.
We did that. We set a one-year moratorium, and that's what it needs to be. We can't keep, I mean, one thing that we did retract on was the waterworks building, but nobody had ever had a plan. Finally, some people came forth and had a plan and had vision, and
What's the
people like
plan?
Mr.
What's the
Cullis.
plan?
Mr. Cullis is working on it, and
There's
Mr.
no
Hoffman.
plan.
and-
There's no plan. It just
It's-
says we want to work, give us
When
some
it
time.
comes to
It's
us,
due in the first meeting
I
of
gotcha.
January.
that's correct. And my only statement is I want to wish all those out there a happy Hanukkah, which begins today, and a Merry Christmas to y'all. We'll open the floor up for public comment. You all know the rules. You get 4 minutes. Please state your name and address. Ms. Clark.
Lisa Clark, 602 South Broad, Holly. I just want to say thank you to the council for keeping your word that you would give us a moratorium, look into this thoroughly. And I'm very saddened that Mr. Cruikshank, who is elected by the people, one of which I am, feels that what the people want in this case and what they wanted when they came to the meeting and they asked to have this looked into further doesn't matter. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion as a property owner, as a business person, as a DDA board member. I don't want to see Holly's reputation and image damaged by this marijuana thing. If it's legalized, then that's time enough. But if you promise to give it a year to look into it, you should stick to your word. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. Tony?
Tony Engelberg, 115 Cogshell. I'd like to kind of echo what Lisa said. I understand the thoughts regarding a ballot initiative. On the other hand, if we say we're not going to put it in the people's hands by having a committee and whatnot, then we turn around and say, but we're going to let the people vote on it. That whole concept to me kind of sends a mixed message. You guys know very clearly how I feel about the drug issue, recreational and otherwise, in Holly, and I would have concerns considering we unfortunately do have a pretty high level of illegal marijuana and drug use in Holly. That's not a secret. Giving those people a chance to vote to legalize their activity that is already illegal doesn't, at this point I would say you guys are the elected officials. You guys are supposed to look at the big picture. So that's all I've really got to say about that. I'd like to briefly touch on what Debbie said earlier. Never thought about flipping off anybody at a council meeting. That's never crossed my mind. So whoever is responsible for doing that, I don't know what to say to that. As somebody who is vocal, sometimes complimentary and sometimes critical, I would say you guys as a group, all of you, have done an incredible job, I think, of actually discussing issues. One of the complaints I've honestly had in the past is that I felt that sometimes council was rubber stamping stuff that I thought needed more time and more scrutiny, and you guys have clearly, you guys aren't doing that. And so for all of the grief you guys take, I'd like to compliment you guys for that. Quick question regarding the lawsuit. Does the village have any kind of insurance rider that would cover any of these expenses?
So that type of allegation or claim is not covered by any insurance policies. And so that is strictly on the water customers that are involved in that fund.
So how does a municipality protect itself and protect its citizens from frivolous lawsuits?
They can't.
You really can't?
Well, so you totally can, because as the attorneys tell us, anybody that has $300 can file this type of suit. It can be totally baseless, like this one was. So word out of the result of this suit, and then continue to get the word out of exactly how we use our funds. I think we're very transparent when we do our funds anyways. I mean, so every year, before we set rates or before we do budget, we hold public meetings. Unfortunately, they're not standing room only meetings for people, but now we have
Streaming.
The camera system will help us get the word out a little more. But at that meeting, and we'll be doing water and sewer discussions in our March meeting, the second Tuesday in March. That's when we're projected to do those discussions. We will lay out, just like we do every year, what our fund balance is, what our projected expenses are, what our needs are, and those are all things that go into setting the water and sewer rates for that next year. That's when we set those. Unfortunately, this year, we'll have to put in there $200,000 expense, and that will be calculated into the water and sewer rates, and that's the unfortunate part. But we are very transparent, and I appreciate your comments about the council, and I know it.
As do we.
Staff.
Yeah, thank you.
We've been trying to get as much information out as we possibly can about what we do with the money.
Real quick, one last thing I've got to say is Dickens Festival this year, completely amazing, awesome. Kudos to George Cullis and everybody else who was involved. The village was done very, very proud. So,
Thank you, Mr. Engelberg. Outstanding. Do we have any further? Mr. Cullis? Mr. Cullis, before you speak, during my council comments, I forgot one thing. Ms. Hughes, my regards to your loss of your grandmother. I believe I'm speaking for all of council.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Go ahead, Mr. Cullis.
Yes, George Cullis, 601 East Maple Street. Good news on the lawsuit. The sad part about that is we have these open meetings as a part of transparency. We have moved to the point where we have cameras so people at home that aren't able to make it can see these meetings. The township has moved their meetings over here. It's a week from Wednesday, little advertisement, 6:30 right here. You can come to those meetings. We are open. You can come. You can talk about these things. I sat on the council back when Kathy Behrens was here. The first time I got my packet, I saw all those electric bills, and I thought, what the heck, how do we have so many electric bills? And I came over and I sat down, and they explained to me that they're all divided by departments, and it has to do with the light poles and the whole thing. So you can always get answers to this stuff. And it's really unfortunate when somebody doesn't come forward looking for information, looking for facts, and to think that this lawsuit came from two of our own residents. That's really unfortunate. It's just a sad thing. And I think if you look at the number of users we have on the water, and you look at these legal fees that it cost every one of us like $75 a piece for nothing. You know, I mean, that's a tremendous amount of money. Anyway, secondly, on the DDA, when you made your report, because I'm on the DDA board with you, we had the resolution. Is that not coming tonight?
So actually, that was a consent agenda.
It's already done.
Most resolutions are, so that was approved.
Okay, so you might want, when I'm done, you may want to comment on that, so that, because the public has heard so much disdain over those things, we probably want to make a public announcement so they understand it's been resolved. Third thing, you were talking about how much work the council does. We all know that the pay is on the low end. It's because it was stuck in the charter. There's nothing you can do to change it unless you go to the ballot. I do remember somebody talking about bringing that up on the ballot. I think one of the ways that you might want to come forward to do that is allow cost of living to be effectual, even though the charter has it set at one rate. I think the voters would agree that cost of living would be a fair thing to bring forward. Just a suggestion. My fourth thing is on the Dickens Festival. I will come back as the director of the Dickens Festival, and I will give you an economic report when those numbers are in. It just finished on Sunday. But what I do want to tell you is this. Ken McKay, we all know Ken, he runs the carriages downtown. They had 3 carriages going all day long, nonstop. And Ken told me, he said, wow. He said, people are impressed. He said, people are coming and they're saying how surprised they were, how clean our town was, how nice the people were. It was fun to be here. We had people that have never been here before, a lot of them. We had 4 buses come in over the 3 weekends. One of those was a group from St. Clair Shores, 2 buses, 110 people, They spent $18 per person.
It's George's.
Well, just stop it. Hit the button. I got it shut off.
We
Did
went
that
through this last night.
I'm sorry. But they spent $18 a person between the Dickens Tea and the carriage ride. They also had lunch at the Holly Hotel. And when they got back on the bus at the end of the day, Ebenezer Scrooge always meets them over at the railroad tracks when they come in, because the bus by law has to stop and open the door, and that's where he jumps on. So we help them get parked, and we welcome to town. And on their way out, I always meet them when they load. And one of the things I did on both buses was I said, I need a show of hands of how many people bought nothing. I had no hands on either bus. Everybody had a bag. Everybody had a package. That's a huge economic impact to this community. And I think that needs to be noted. We had 2 from St. Clair Shores, we had 1 from Oak Park, and we had 1 from Dearborn. We already have 1 bus scheduled next year coming out of Toledo. So that's the kind of thing that this festival does. And again, I want to thank, I've been working with Mr. Clausen, Mr. Walker, as the director of the festival, and we have had a very successful year, so we appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Cullis. To Mr. Cullis's point about DDA last night, we, myself, Mr. Walker, Mr. Rossell, put together a clarification of the terms for all the DDA members, and that is now behind us. Is there any further public comment? Mr. Love.
John Love, 200 North Saginaw. There's on this council attitude with the relationship with people here, I'd like to see it change to 1 meeting a month. That would mean that these people don't have to come down here twice a month. I think you could conduct your meetings, and it would be more effective and efficient to do it once a month. I've talked multiple times when they've had these revisions in the charter, but no, we're not going to do that. What,
It's
at
in
least
the
you-
Charter and Ordinance Committee as we speak.
Pardon?
It's in the
It's
Charter
there
and
now.
Ordinance Committee.
Well, good. It's finally getting there. 10 years, 20 years later.
I haven't been on here for.
I know you haven't been. I understand that. I haven't been on it. I have. But don't take away from my time here.
I'll try to get 17 seconds.
All right, thanks.
17
Moving
seconds
on
back
to
the
the
clock, please.
water rates. I don't know what was done to negotiate with these people as far as negotiating on the water rate situation. I do know, and it was brought to my attention by a city council member in the past about this Bolt decision. And what it says is the rate has to be based on usage. But no, we have a tax that's put on everybody, regardless of usage, regardless of if they're hooked up. But that's the basis of the Headley Amendment. If you have a tax, you get to vote on it.
Well, according to
But
the
that's,
judge.
no, I don't know what they said. I don't know the details of this case. I'm just stating what I'm stating. So I'm not arguing about it. Please. I've dealt with judges too. And in essence, they don't care what the law is. They just do something that's convenient. And I've had multiple cases that I've dealt with these judges. They're a disgrace as far as I'm concerned. Moving on to the DDA terms, the law says that they have to be staggered every year. It's a replacement made. But our attorney has come up with a plan that says, forget about that. This next year, there's going to be no expirations of terms. So that's in violation of the law. Yeah, it doesn't. What year does that expiration start? You're holding it up and waving it at me.
November 2018.
November 28th, 18?
18, yeah.
That's a
November-
year from now.
That's correct. Well,
Well,
11 months.
11 months.
Got 1 minute, John.
Oh, I'm working along. Okay, the waterworks need to have access to this thing. Not the plan, we're going to sit here, we're going to lock it up, and nobody's going to go down and look at it. You can't develop a plan without access. You need to work that out. The auto wash on Saginaw Street was owned by the village for a year, and nothing has been done. It's the way it was a year ago, and for a year they stored all their equipment in that yard. There should be a sign there for sale and get that moving on that project.
You're at time, John.
My time is up. Well,
Yep.
hey, we just got started.
Thank you.
We'll save it for next year. Happy Christmas.
Do you have any other further public comment? No? No, this meeting is adjourned at, what's the actual time? That clock up there needs to be
8:50.
changed.
8:50
Meeting's adjourned
p.m.
at 8:50. Merry Christmas to y'all.
Same to you.
I sure hope so.
And your family.
Oh, yeah. Mr. Clausen? Brian?
The village president doesn't count.
Well, he's a member.
He is not.
Debbie,